Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. Very glad to have you here, whether you're tuning in live or watching back on demand. For those that don't know or haven't heard from me before, my name is James. I'm the content manager here at Lunio. I'll be hosting the conversation today, asking the questions and hopefully keeping us on track for time. We're aiming for around 35 minutes. I think we should be okay there. And I'll cover a few other bits of housekeeping in just a moment. But as you probably know, today's webinar is on peak sales season, how to succeed in driving more conversions and revenue. And now really is the ideal time to be thinking about putting your plan in place. Forgive me for using the cliche, but failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And I think that's especially true this year, as we are expecting to see very high levels of competition on the paid media front. So even though, it might still feel far away at the minute, the more prep you can do in advance, the less stressful it is later down the line. Nothing's worse than a last minute panic come Black Friday. So to help us out with that today, I'm speaking with Nicole Santana, paid media supervisor at the Atlanta-based digital agency MarketWick. Nicole has over 6 years experience in paid media and manages several million in yearly ad spend for clients across a range of industries. So she really is an expert when it comes to preparing for peak sales. So how are you doing today, Nicole?
I'm so good. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on. I know you were on a work retreat last week. Is that right? How did that go?
It was excellent. If anyone's familiar, we went to Lake Lanier in the Atlanta area and stayed at a big lake house. So I'm tired. The voice is a little bit weak, but I'm good to go. And we had a great time.
Good, good. Well, I hope the weather in Georgia is much better than we're getting in Manchester. It kind of feels like winter's arrived early in Manchester this year. We're having a lot of gray cloud and rain, but I imagine it's quite different in Georgia.
Yeah, we're still pushing 90 degrees here, so it is nice and toasty today
I'm
here in
jealous. I'm jealous.
mid-September.
So as I mentioned, just a few very quick bits of housekeeping just before we get into it. So we're recording this session and we will send it out to everyone via email to watch on demand, or you can forward it on to others to watch at a later date. I will also be creating a written summary of the webinar on the Lunio blog with kind of key takeaways and actionable points. So be on the lookout for that when we have got a chance to write that up. If you have any questions, as you've probably already seen, you can pop them in the chat and get the discussion going there. And we will also be sending out a few polls during the session to get audience feedback. You don't have to vote in the polls if you don't want to, but it is always interesting to see the different opinions and stances we've got in the audience here today. And lastly, if you wait until the end of the webinar, we will automatically redirect you to our free resource hub where you can access guides and tools to help boost your campaign performance and maximize your return on ad spend in Q4. So that's all the housekeeping done with. We've got 6 points to cover on the agenda today. So firstly, what the traditional approach to peak sales season usually looks like. Then next, we'll talk about the market changes and other factors to be aware of for 2022 in particular. Then we'll cover best practices for maximizing return on ad spend on peak season campaigns. Then we'll discuss the data and insights you can be gathering this year to then help improve your peak season performance next year. Then we'll touch on how to manage your PPC spend in a tougher economic climate. As I referenced earlier, this year is expected to be particularly competitive. And then we will close with a discussion on how to migrate from smart shopping to Performance Max in Q4 2022 and kind of things you can do to manage that process as efficiently and effectively as possible. So let's get into it and kick things off. So Nicole, in the past, when peak season was approaching, what did your prep tend to look like?
Yeah, so Traditionally, a lot of similar philosophies and mindset went into the prep, but I would say the timeline is really where we have seen the biggest change. In the past, we would, get a little bit closer to the holiday season before we would start to really get that prep in full swing. Whereas this year, we know that shoppers are starting to shop earlier. And even the ones that shopped earlier wishes that maybe they would have started sooner than they did. And so we really need to back up into, where we're at right now to prep for the holiday season. There's a lot of changing factors that we'll get into here in a moment, but for sure, the biggest thing is going to be all about timing and then all about how you're prepping for what's to come on the back end of the end of your holiday peak season campaigns.
Yeah, so it's kind of like making sure that, you don't miss the window and making sure that there's not that last minute panic. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
avoid it at all costs if possible.
Yes.
So you kind of touched on it in your answer there. There's a few, this year is slightly different to 2021. So what are those factors that people should be aware of this year, 2022, compared to 2021?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, and as you see here, 50% of shoppers say that they're going to start shopping earlier this year to avoid an item being out of stock. I know globally we are all impacted by some different supply chain and economic constraints that are impacting going into peak season this year. But on the flip side of that, spending hasn't slowed down at all. So we are still seeing projections of increased spend, especially on the search side going into the holiday season. So it's really, really important to make sure that you're prepping early. You have your promotional calendar laid out well ahead of time, using automation as your friend. Anything that you can do to automate holiday specific campaigns, promos, especially as you get into that sort of window between Black Friday and Small Business Tuesday. There's a lot that happens there depending on the nature of your business, and making sure that you have everything ready to go from a lever standpoint to go on and off. In addition to that, really making sure that you're looking at an omni-channel approach and a full funnel approach, starting with, like I said, backing up into what I'm going to call this pre-peak season of how you can start to get that traffic and awareness and interest building. So when we get into the real peak of the season, your consumers are ready to convert and buy.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. I think I saw some points about increased demand for mystery boxes. Is that something that is on your radar this year?
Yes, that's a great call out. Google has shown that there's been an increase in demand for mystery boxes, expected to skyrocket this year in 2022. So looking into those trend type things, any holiday specific keywords that we can capitalize on are also going to be super important. So not just how can we let our overall marketing strategy drive paid, but how can we take what we're seeing from a trend perspective, like the mystery box example, and use that to set our whole business up for success, even if that's a new, product offering or something that we have to spin up.
Yeah, and is that something that you've seen some of your clients kind of move into, these mystery box offerings and kind of packaging up products in that way?
Yeah, and it's actually been a great opportunity for our commerce brands to do a mystery item, and maybe it's something that we call it like the imperfect item or the flawed item. And it's a free item that's a mystery. So you're kind of still playing on that mystery component, but you're also getting rid of some of that surplus of stuff that you don't want to sell for your normal full price. But you still want to get into the hands of your consumers because it's still beautiful, and to the naked eye, no one would probably know. And it's a really great way to mirror those two together.
Yeah, that makes sense. So pay attention to that one this year and look at your stock and see if there's any options there. So next, we've kind of touched on some of the points already, but when it comes to best practices for maximizing your PPC campaign performance during peak sales season, what are the foundational starting points and the kind of building blocks that you put in place for your clients?
Yeah, so definitely starting with an omni-channel plan, like I know that I touched on. But once you get that plan and that promo calendar really, really locked down, it's a matter of using each individual channel to the its fullest potential. So that's going to mean things like optimizing your product feeds, even all the way through to optimizing your product landing pages, looking at audience insights from the previous years and how you can use that to your advantage this year. Now's the time also, I always tell our clients to start setting up, specific audiences that you might want to activate on down the line. So this is a great time to get those retargeting tags set up, everything you want to do from a tagging and page identification standpoint to tap into those people down the line. And again, making sure that you're following people all the way through the start of their shopping journey to the end. And that does include the abandoned cart journey, and making sure that you have that fully tied in, and making sure that you're leaving no money left on the table from a full circle e-commerce perspective.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Could you just talk a bit more about that, like the abandoned cart journey, and kind of what people should be aware of, and because obviously peak season is peak time for abandoned carts as well. So what things should people be thinking about when it comes to abandoned carts and minimizing those?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple factors that have to do with paid specifically, and then a couple just general business factors to look into. One of those being discounts and shipping. A lot of times we've seen with clients that the abandoned cart rate might increase if the shipping is not going to be fast enough, especially as we get closer to that holiday time, or it's a high cost shipping. So looking at ways that, again, I know that there's a lot of supply chain and economic limitations, but any way that you can discount shipping. And it actually is a great way to up your average order value with it, is to, do that classic, if you spend $100, you get free shipping. If you can get someone to the $75 mark and it's $8 shipping, it's a lot easier to justify adding another item. So it's kind of a win-win. And then making sure that you have a full marketing strategy, again, outside of paid, utilizing emails, promo codes, retargeting ads to engage with people that are leaving items in the cart, to give them an additional incentive to fully complete the transaction, whether that be, again, free shipping or discount code, or maybe this could be a place that you can incorporate the mystery item to have them return and take advantage of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just you mentioned obviously retargeting. Retargeting is important. Is there any points in particular about retargeting? Any best practices there that you would recommend to roll out during peak season, different from how you might retarget at different times of the year?
Yeah. So aside from just the traditional dynamic of, this is the item that you were looking at and left in your cart, and I'm going to have it follow you everywhere, I also like to look at historically, what are sort of those sister side-by-side products that you see people purchasing? So if someone, let's say, leaves a hair clip in their cart, and you often find them purchasing that alongside of a hairbrush, utilizing what you know about those two together to help incentivize the abandoned cart issue. So maybe that's something like retargeting with a bundle of anybody that's left a hair clip in their cart. If they add a brush, then they get 20% off the combo. Again, helping that average order value increase, but then also incentivizing them to come back and purchase an additional item that's really right there in the tertiary area that they're trying to purchase anyways.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously peak season is where all the money is, where certainly a lot of the money is in terms of PPC budgets, and wherever there is money, fraud kind of always tends to follow. So with increased spending during this period, we always notice at Lunio there's a kind of big spike in invalid activity during peak season. And one simple kind of straightforward thing you can do to improve your campaign performance is to block all that invalid activity and use that money that you're saving on bad clicks, reinvest that into your top performing campaigns. And basically you can then get more conversions with the same ad spend. So yeah, peak season is a big time for invalid activity. And it's just something to be aware of if you're looking for ways to get the most value out of your budget as you possibly can this year. So that's 2022. Let's fast forward to next year just for a second, because obviously peak season 2023 is probably not on everyone's radar just at the minute. We have to get through 2022 first. But I think it's important to note that there are data and insights that you can be gathering this year to obviously optimize your performance next year. So if people are kind of, forward looking and they're thinking, what can we gather this year that will help us out when we get to this time next year? What would be your advice to people there?
Yeah, so the slide definitely gives it away. I have some thoughts on the whole cookies thing, but you really set me up for it with what you're talking about with the invalid clicks and reinvesting that money. Because one of the biggest things that I have seen in my own experience and in all of the research I've done is to really take a look and take stock of what your return on ad spend is and what your conversion rate is across different product categories in your business. And I think that when you are, partnering with something like Lunio and you are having the most clean data possible, it's really setting you up for success to know what is your true return on ad spend. And there's no sort of outliers impacting that data. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. So obviously cookies are going away. This has been pushed down the line a few times here. So we'll see when that actually happens. But the name of the game, to prep yourself up for success later, is going to be as much first party data as you can handle. At every touch point possible, as much as you have the opportunity to capture first party data and audience insights, you're going to be setting yourself up for success in the future. And that's not just things like, straight up like what we think of as first party data, but also insights about your audience. And again, looking at your audience at a product specific level and what you can glean about them is going to help you when we don't have those same targeting options to sort of look at some of the themes and categories of your audience to target that way when we don't have the cookie options anymore. On top of that, look at your spend levels and then probably assume that next year you're going to have to spend more. Despite tough economic changes year over year, we've continued to see paid spending increase, especially paid search. I actually just had a note today that search spend could hit 112 billion by 2023, which is 2x of what it was spent in 2019. So there's no slowing down. So taking a look at what you spent and just assume that you're going to have to spend more and plan accordingly, and invest based on where you're seeing that ROAS and conversion rate. And then highly, highly, highly recommend, a non-negotiable is setting up GA4. You will not have historical data without setting up GA4. And so that's going to be something that's super important to set yourself up for success this year going into next year. And then just a personal market weight and Nicole best practice is to do a holiday post-mortem, and get with all of your relevant teams, look at your creative, look at your audiences, look at your targeting, look at your ad sets, your keywords, everything down to the nitty gritty, and really assess what worked for you this holiday season. So you have a clear cut plan as you start planning into 2023.
So that post-mortem that you do, is that kind of one big session where everyone will kind of pull their data together and you all get together and kind of hammer it all out in a day? What does that look like when you're doing the post-mortem?
Yeah, so we'll usually start with my team. The paid team will pull overall campaign performance, ROAS, conversion rate. We'll also pull any sort of creative insights that we have from creative that seem to work really well, what sort of fell flat, and then the same thing from a keyword standpoint. And then we'll actually sometimes we'll bring in the clients and what they're seeing from, just an overall state of the business side. In some clients' cases, we have access to all of their like Shopify and Google Analytics. And so we can kind of sift through that for ourselves. And then we have in-house creative teams at Market Wake that we bring in as well. And we all kind of get in a war room and we're like, okay, what worked, what didn't, why do we think this didn't work? And we'll just kind of put together like okay, in 6 months when we're getting ready to prepare for 2023, this is not going to be fresh in our brains anymore, but here's sort of the highlight reel of what worked for us and what we should, stay away from next year. So we can kind of, again, continue to whittle away, and maximize the efficiency of those ad dollars.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously, you want the best return on ad spend you can get, but if your return on ad spend is kind of way exceeding your expectations, I think that's the indicator that there probably is some further work to be done in terms of optimizing, and it might be an indication that you could have squeezed more value out of the period. It's obviously great to have a really good return on ad spend, but if it is way above your expectations, I think that is a signal. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely, and can be a signal that it's a good time to consider investing even more, and see that overall lift to your business.
Yeah. So moving on now to talk about the climate that we're in this year. Obviously, there are a lot of different macroeconomic factors which are kind of, the cost of living is rising for everyone around the world, and that obviously has some impact on spend during peak season, and it has an impact on advertisers too. So what would be your advice when it comes to managing your PPC spend in this, increased or higher level of competition this year, and just a tougher economic climate generally?
Mm-hmm. So I think this article, the source that's linked out here, if any of you are interested in reading fully, it's very, very insightful and kind of goes along with what us in the paid community have been saying all along, which is like, just hold tight. It feels like that should be the first place that you pull from your marketing budget, because it's an additional expense on top of, the other things that you're doing in-house, like emails and things like that. But 60% of brands that increased their media investment during the last recession saw ROI improvements over time. And so I actually want to read a quote from that study, and it says, the best way to get through a possible recession and prosper on the other side is to think long-term by investing in your brand and relationships with the customers. Short-term thinking might make some shareholders happy at the next earnings report, but it undermines growth and therefore margins and true shareholder value over both the short and the long term. So while it might be a prettier number on the bottom line now, you're fostering that brand loyalty, brand awareness, brand engagement through a time that maybe some of your other, competitive companies aren't, and that's going to pay off for you in the long run. So I always say, just hold tight. Economies go up and down, things will pass, but at least maintaining spending on some of your core initiatives are going to pay off for you in the long run.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, given the fact that it is scary and there is a risk involved, and a lot of people do panic and they'll slash ad spend and they'll reduce their marketing headcount and things like that. But it is short-sighted, and I think that's the key point that you touched on. It's like, given that there are competitors who may be slashing their ad spend and reducing how much they're investing in marketing, that it creates an opportunity in a way for others to kind of capitalize on the reduced competition from some of their top competitors. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. You didn't hear this from me, but I do love a competitor conquesting play, bidding specifically on competitive terms, and that becomes a much more feasible solution and opportunity during times like this when maybe competitors are pulling back. So if you're not taking advantage of it, someone might.
Yes. Well, yeah, we didn't hear from you, but take note if you're watching. It might be a strategy worth looking into. So the final point that we've got on the agenda is quite a big point. So I want to spend a bit of time discussing this one. It's about the migration from smart shopping to Performance Max in Q4. I think smart shopping is going away at the end of Q3, and campaigns will automatically, if you're on smart shopping, you're going to be migrated across to Performance Max, whether you like it or not. Obviously, you do want to look at your campaigns, and you don't want to just have an automatic migration across to Performance Max. So with that in mind, where should people start when they're making this transition?
Yeah, I think you hit on the first point for sure, and that's get ahead of it. Don't wait for Google to make the change for you. It's a pretty simple migration process, but go ahead and take that under your own control so you can monitor over the following days, what that looks like and when that happens. Also making sure that you have all of the assets that you need for your Performance Max campaign ready to go, including videos, image assets, logos, and ad copy, to make sure that you're fully built out. Some other things that I definitely want to call out is, I think Performance Max has felt very scary to a lot of people because there is sort of a lack of clarity in what exactly is going on in the Google behind the scenes when it comes to Performance Max. But as we've gotten to this point and things have evolved a little bit more, there are some things that you can do to really look at your Performance Max campaigns and maximize the performance that you're getting from them. Look at your Insights tab. It's still limited data, but over time, the trend information that you can pull from that can be helpful. Specifically for commerce, when we're looking at smart shopping going to PMax, if you feel that your performance is maybe suffering since making the Performance Max migration and you aren't falling into this category where you're seeing the 12% increase in conversion value, test a separate PMax asset group that doesn't have any other assets besides your dynamic data feed. That's going to be the closest to a true smart shopping experience that currently exist within the Google realm, and test those against a fully built out asset group, and monitor the performance against those. Also, you can't see an actual SQR from a keyword standpoint, and I know it's weird because Performance Max does so on search, but you can see keyword themes. So look at that and see, are those themes hitting where you want to hit with your business, and can kind of tweak from there. The other thing is looking at landing pages, devices, and geo of where your traffic is, where your traffic is coming from and where they're converting, gives you a good opportunity to, again, sort of continue to tweak and refine.
And would you say, in your experience already, obviously you've been transitioning clients from Smart Shopping to Performance Max for a while now. What are the kind of common stumbling blocks that you come across, or have you generally seen that things tend to run quite smoothly, and you are seeing that 12% increase on conversion value? From the clients you work with, what's your experience been?
Yeah, I would say in general, we have seen improved performance. There is some things that we have kind of seen that we didn't necessarily plan for. And that one big thing is going to be the final URL expansion. So Google recently announced as of October 1st that when you're setting up Performance Max, if you check the final URL expansion box, which means it can run to anywhere on the site versus just the landing page that you decide on, that it can actually start to pull in assets and copy from other places on your site. So again, it's just another place as marketers that we're losing a little bit of control. So we've had some of our commerce clients where they've had a really popular blog post start to eat up some of their Performance Max traffic. Now the return is still positive, and it's working out for us. We can see in Google Analytics, our page paths, that's still okay, but that's definitely something to look out for, especially as Google's making that change on October 1st.
Yeah, that's interesting. And with Performance Max, and I'm definitely not an expert in Performance Max, but we did our previous webinar. We sat down with two Performance Max kind of experts, Bob and Miles. If anyone was at that webinar, hello again. Nice to see you at this one. But they recommended creating separate asset groups for seasonal products. So with your clients, are you kind of creating holiday specific products in separate asset groups and keeping those separate from the rest of your campaigns?
Yes, that's a great call out. We are doing that with seasonal items, and we're doing that with bestseller items to ensure that they're sort of operating off their own budget line, and we can really, again, tweak that performance as much as possible. So another place that, especially as we look forward to 2023, looking at your bestsellers and stuff for this year will be important, because you'll want to be able to have that clarity going into next year.
Yeah, for sure. I know it is. That's one of the big complaints with Performance Max, is the kind of lack of insights, this kind of black box where you don't fully know what's happening behind the scenes. You're just kind of getting a top level overview of the insights. One thing I would say though is Lunio can complement Performance Max quite well just by giving you a bit more insight and visibility over the data that are going into your campaigns, and kind of dealing with that lack of insights problem that everyone is suffering on Performance Max. Using Lunio can give you a bit more visibility into kind of what's going on behind the scenes with the traffic and the clicks in your campaigns. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of the topics that we wanted to cover today. Big thanks to you, Nicole, for all your insights there. There's a lot of useful stuff to take away. I'll get those written up into the blog post. So could you let people know where to go if they want to connect with you, and if there's anything else you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. This has been so much fun. If you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn at Nicole Santana. You can also email me directly at nicole.santana, SANTANA, @marketwake.com.
Thanks, Nicole. Likewise, if you want to connect with me directly, you can feel free to add me or send me a connection request on LinkedIn, James Deeney, DEENEY. Or if you prefer to email us, if you have any questions, you can contact us directly at hello@lunio.ai. We'll get back to you and we'll be happy to help. As I mentioned in the intro, and as you can see on the slide here, we have got our free resource hub. When the session finishes in just a moment, you will be automatically redirected to our free resource page where you can access those guides and tools to boost your campaign performance. I will say also you can also download 100 PPC memes there to share with your team and the other performance marketers in your life. I can't guarantee those without knowledge of PPC will find those memes funny, but there are some real gems in there. So I recommend checking those out if you get a chance. Lastly, big thanks to everyone for tuning in, either here at the live event or on demand. Hopefully we'll see you again on one of our future webinars. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.